before we do that, let's do introductions. My name's Dave McLean. I work for the ANU admissions team.
Hi, my name is Amit Poonath. I work for the ANU admissions team as well.
Hello, I'm Alicia Kelly and I also work for the admissions team.
Now, we'll be talking to you for probably about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll take questions at the end. You'll see on your screens a Q&A function. If you do have a question at any point, just click on that, write down your question, and we'll get to those at the end. Okay, let's dive in. So the new co-curricular or service requirement is an admission requirement. This means that to be admitted to ANU, you need to have shown that you have participated in some out of the classroom activities. Now, from the outset, I'm going to say that this isn't about CV stacking. We don't want you to do things that you don't want to do. It's about ANU recognising that the activities that you do outside the classroom are valuable. When you participate in things like volunteering, sport, part-time work, you are developing skills that will help you succeed at ANU and longer term help you transition to the job that you want to get. We also hope that when you do arrive at ANU, you will continue to develop those skills that you've started to develop through your co-curricular activities. We have a vibrant on-campus community. There are all kinds of things for you to do. We've got student-led societies and clubs, volunteering opportunities, exchange opportunities, internships. The list really does go on. So we hope that when you come to ANU, you'll embrace these opportunities and continue to develop this soft or enterprise skills that you've started to develop through the outside of classroom activities that you've done during your high school. So let's talk about details, and the best way to explain things, I think, is with an example. There's three of us here today. Let's say that we're all applying to ANU. So I, as a student applying to ANU, have had to work to support my family. I haven't had time for any other co-curricular activities, but I do spend most of my weekends at work at a McDonald's, let's say. Amit, you do absolutely everything under the sun. Okay?
Sounds about right. Hey.
Absolutely everything. You are the captain of your school. You play soccer on the weekend. Think of a co-curricular activity, Amit does it. Alicia, you play for your school soccer team, but you're not very good. You haven't won a single game this season at all, but you've got up every day, you've gone out to that field in the cold, and you have tried your hardest.
Trying.
Now, under the new co-curricular service requirement, we have all met the threshold, and we're not ranked in any way against one another. Again, this isn't about CV stacking. I'm probably going to say that a few times because that is important. It's about doing the things that you are passionate in, because when I'm at work, I'm learning skills that will help me at ANU. Amit has certainly learnt those skills, and Alicia has gained skills as well. We have had different opportunities. Some, such as Amit, might have had more opportunity to participate in more activities. So he's not given an advantage because I have had to work to support, let's say, my family. So the amount of activities that you do does not matter, provided you meet the requirement. This is either something you've met or something that you haven't met. And to be admitted to ANU, you need to meet this co-curricular service requirement. If you do not meet it, unfortunately, your application does end there. So a good way to think about the co-curricular service threshold is it's a foot in the door. Once you've met the requirement, fantastic, we put that information aside and we begin to assess you in the more traditional sense based on your academic performance. I will say that the number of activities that you've participated in does not inflate your score for the purpose of admission. Again, it is just the threshold. You need to show that you've participated in these activities. Once you've met the threshold, and we'll talk about that in detail in a moment, you've met it, that's it, we move on to admission. Okay, so we might jump in and have a look at our website, and we'll get into a bit of the details about how this works. So we're now on our website. I'm going to go through all the steps so you can follow along if you want. We're going to navigate to the co-curricular or service requirement webpage, which you'll see under the study button here, then apply, then domestic applications, And if we scroll down, we'll see a box about the co-curricular or service requirement. And almost there, we come to the co-curricular or service requirement webpage. Now we're going to look at a document that might seem a little bit overwhelming at first, but that's okay. We're going to talk you through it. I'm going to throw over to my colleague to talk about this document you see now.
Great, fantastic. So let's talk about the co-curricular or service schedule. So very much like the name, what the schedule does is that it lists activities that ANU will recognise towards meeting the co-curricular or service requirement. So instead of saying co-curricular or service about 2,500 times during our session today, I will be shortening it to the CCS requirement. In other words, the co-curricular or service requirement. So what we have here is an in-depth schedule that talks to you about the activities that ANU will recognise, the skills that match those activities, and we'll run through all of that. But like Dave said, there's no need to be overwhelmed by this. The aim or the purpose of the schedule is to give you enough information to be sure of the activities you've participated in and just getting you prepared for when it comes to your application and that you're actually keying in what you need to and that it's a swift and easy process for you because again, we're here to help, not make things harder. So two things that I'd like to start off with is the orange column on the left and the blue column on the right. The orange column on the left actually lists all the activities that ANU will recognise towards meeting the CCS requirement. Once again, to echo what Dave said, the schedule is very broad. We understand that not everyone are doing the same activities while they're at school. You're all doing wonderful activities that are very different from each other. And we want to be sure, and we want to make sure that we are listing them in our schedule. And then we'll talk about those activities that are not on the schedule in a bit as well. But the very first thing to note is the vast diversity in the activities that we've listed. So in your first glance at the schedule, if you've not already gone through it, if you don't see your activity rather, I really encourage you to have another look because chances are it's in there. So once again, let's go through the major sort of clusters that we have. So we have community and service activities. So these are things like volunteering for a registered charity or youth cadets or Girl Scouts or caring for a family member. So these are community-based or service-based activities that you're currently doing. Then we have employment, which includes paid and unpaid employment. And that actually, pro tip, includes entrepreneurial activities as well, because we know that some of you have set up your own companies, for instance. So that's captured under employment. We then have creative and performance activities. So this is everything from creative writing to performance in a theatre production to specific competitions that you might be involved with. We then move on to academic extension activities. These are activities that you're doing as part of a university extension program or summer school that you're doing, again, in exchange with another university or another school, Model United Nations. These are all activities that come under academic extension. We then have educational and scholastic activities. These are any activities that have an educational purpose or a scholastic purpose, and by that what I mean is you are interested in a particular subject in school and this is an extension of that. So it could be a math Olympiad or a youth forum that you are interested in because you're doing a humanities-based subject in school, the Google Science Fair. Again, a very vast array of activities there. And then we have gaming, sport, and fitness, where we include gaming activities like esports. Yes, esports is a part of our schedule. We know a lot of you are involved in esport competitions, so if you've participated in one of those competitions, chances are that you can list that as an activity. And at the end, we have other activities, and like I said, we'll come to that in a bit. You'll also notice that all the activities that are listed under the orange column are sort of listed at a high level. In other words, we've not actually picked on a specific competition's name or a very specific activity in those terms. Instead, what we've done is we've sort of summarized what that activity generally means to you as Year 12 students or Year 11 students. And instead, we've given examples of what we mean when we say volunteering for a registered charity, for example, or what we mean when we say educational scholastic activities. So once again, that's why I encourage you to have a look at the schedule and see whether your specific activity, if it's not under the orange column, would at least be under the examples column. So definitely have a look. What we've then done is we've done a lot of research to look at what these activities actually entail. And then based on our research, based on both internal and external research, we've matched those activities to 7 soft skills or 7 enterprise skills, as Dave said earlier on. And those skills are outlined under the blue column on the right-hand side of the schedule. So these are activities like community engagement or communication or leadership, creative and critical thinking, and so on and so forth. So we might actually zoom in to the blue column so that you have a bit more of a clear view there. There it is. So once again, it's community engagement, inclusion and awareness of diversity, communication, leadership, personal responsibility, teamwork, and creative and critical thinking. So what we've done, like I said, is we've done some research and we've looked at what the majority of students who attend an activity might gain from that activity in terms of these soft skills. So as you can see, each activity is mapped against these skills based on our research. And the requirement is on the number of skills, not on the number of activities. Like Dave said, and again, it's something that we will be repeating throughout this session, it is not a CV ranking exercise. We're most interested in the types of activities that you're doing outside the classroom, and it is your commitment towards this out-of-class learning that ANU cares about. You don't have to worry about including 10 or 15 activities because, like Dave said, it doesn't inflate your selection rank. In other words, it doesn't give you any additional bonus points or adjustment factors, as they're called now, towards your application. That being said, we do encourage you to list all the activities that you've done in school so that we have a better idea of what you're involved with. Because when you're here at the ANU, we'd like you to participate in similar activities at the university. Very much again, like Dave said, it's not about just meeting an admission requirement to come into ANU. We want to sort of communicate how important these activities are while you're at school, and when you're here, we want you to continue with them, and we will help you in that process as well. So the third aspect that I'd like to talk about is the requirement itself. There are 2 key things that we need to talk about here. One, the requirement is on the skills, not the number of activities, which does mean that if you've met the requirement based on 1 activity, that's it, you've met the requirement. You might not need more than 1 activity. But again, just to reiterate, the requirement is on the skills, and the current requirement as it stands is 3 out of those 7 skills. As you can see, the total skills column towards the very right-hand side of the schedule outlines what each activity has ticked off in terms of the total number of skills. You need 1 activity, 1 or more activities that gives you 3 unique skills, and ta-da, you've met the co-curricular or service requirement, or the CCS requirement for sure. The second aspect that we need to talk about are commitment requirements. So towards the middle of the schedule, you will see this column called commitment requirements, and you'll see commitment requirements for every activity under the orange column. For the vast array of these activities, like Dave said, it's not about competitively ranking you, it's just about participating in those activities. And as if you can prove that you've participated in those activities by way of supporting documentation, which is something we'll get into as well, that's it, you've met the requirement. But certain activities actually have specific commitment requirements. And a very good example is the one that we are on right now. And this is volunteering for a registered activity. And that's the first activity that you see under the community and service section or cluster. And you can see that it's not just participation for this activity in particular. The commitment requirements specifically state that you need to have committed to at least 15 hours over 6 months in the last 2 years. That's about 2.5 plus hours a month. But what we're aiming for is that continued participation, that continued commitment, so that we can tick you off as being involved in that activity at the skill that we require you to be. So that's why it's very important to have a look at the commitment requirements as well, just to make sure that if there are specific requirements, that they are catered to. A very common question that we get during webinars like the ones that we talk about is when you need to be doing these activities and whether there's a time limit. There is a time limit, so you need to be doing these activities, or at least the activities that you will be using towards meeting the CCS requirement between years 10 and year 12. However, as you know, applications are currently open and you're currently in year 12, so it's not just any time in year 12, but it's year 12, but before you submit your application. So it can be any time between, any time during year 10, any time during year 11, and that first few months in year 12 as well, but before applications close, which again, pro tip for you, applications close on the 31st of May this year. So you still have some time if you're not involved in any of those activities. You still have some time to have a look at the schedule and see what interests you, so that you're ensuring that you've met the ANU CCS requirement.
We should say on that there are certainly some activities that don't require you to show commitment over a period of time. They're one-offs. Participation in a competition of some sort is one example that springs to mind. We'll just really reiterate that you've probably noticed that a lot of these activities by themselves meet the requirements. You don't need to do more than get 3 of the skills. And just for those people who did come in late, these points are just for the purpose of meeting this threshold. It does not inflate your selection rate for the purpose of admission to ANU. Now, this is a very detailed document. However, try as we might, we can't think of every single activity under the sun. So certainly have a look through, but if you've participated in something that you think should meet the requirement, but isn't on this list, we have an other category, and we will assess these activities on a case-by-case basis as they come through the application.
Great.
And that, I think, is probably a pretty good segue to talk about the supporting documentation that you need.
Fantastic.
So to do so, we might actually log into the application itself and register a few co-curricular activities and talk about documentation. So to get to the application portal, we go to the ANU webpage, select Study, Apply, Domestic Applications, and Apply Now. And here's an application I started earlier. Let's try that a second time.
Should I give it a...
Please do. It's not liking me today. And remember, if you have any questions, just record them with the Q&A function. I'll get to those at the end. Fantastic.
I'll feed that back to you, Dave.
Thank you.
And
so let's go through.
That's actually...
For the purpose of this exercise, we'll delete some of the activities that we've added in our test application, and we'll start from scratch. So as you progress through your application, you'll come to this section, the co-curricular or service section, which is number 3. And this is where you will tell us about the co-curricular or service activities that you have participated in. Telling us about the activities is simple. There's an add new activity button down the bottom here, and the activities that you see in this panel will match those that we looked at on the co-curricular service schedule. So let's, for the purpose of this exercise, add employment as one of our co-curricular activities. I'm confirming here that I have met the commitment requirements, and I'm also confirming that I need to upload supporting documentation. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And I can repeat this to add all the activities that I have participated in. As Amit said, you do have to meet the requirement, and you can meet the requirement with, in a lot of cases, just one activity, but you are encouraged to tell us about all the activities that you do, and that will help us understand you as the applicant better, and perhaps be able to match you up with activities that are offered at ANU. Let's also add a team sport activity as well. And you could do this all day long if you wanted to. If you have someone like Amit in my example, you might have dozens of different activities. You can add as many as you like. Now, as you add activities, these little boxes will appear down the bottom of the screen. And you'll see a little warning icon that says documents must be provided. Now, this, as I mentioned at the start, is an admission requirement. So we need to have evidence from you that confirms that you participated in the activities that you said you participated in. Now, this isn't about writing lengthy statements. We just want to confirm that the thing that you did, you actually did. So we'll have a look at some examples of supporting documentation now. And again, these are on our co-curricular webpage. And do follow along if you can. Okay, so on the right-hand side of our co-curricular or service requirement webpage, we've prepared a number of different example documentation. So in our activity, we entered that we were participating, we had been participating in employment. So let's have a look at the employment example. And again, it's not about lengthy statements. We just need to know the details. So in this example, the name is given, the period of time that the applicant worked is given, and the amount of work that they did over that period is given as well. So we're confirming the name of the person, that they met the commitment requirements, and that they met the specific commitment requirements. So you may have caught when we were looking at the schedule that for employment, you need to show that you have worked for a 6-month period and committed to a certain number of hours every month during that period. This document, if we scroll down to the bottom, is also signed by what we call an authorized person. So that could be your manager in the example of employment. Let's have a look at another example. So we'll actually have a look at this creative writing one. So if you were to participate in a creative writing competition, you may receive a certificate. This is actually based on a real certificate that a student had provided us previously. You'll notice at the top there is details of the organisation and the competition. In this example, it's your name, and there's detail on when the activity took place. And because this is an official certificate, it can be used as supporting documentation. Now,
and just to add to what Dave was saying, as you can see, the examples are on official letterheads of the organisations that conduct the activity. It is important that we get the contact details of these organisations if we need to verify that we need to verify your documentation that you upload in your application. So as you can see, there's contact details for the Somerset Story Fest competition right at the bottom there. In the employment example that we have here, in the employment example that we have here, again, the manager's contact details are there, which allows us to verify the information if required. You might need to share again.
Sorry, we may have dropped out on the sharing there, but we're back now. Now, I'm sure you're thinking of examples where you might not have supporting documentation available. There might not be certificates that you already have. If that's the case, then you can download the supporting document template from our website, which we'll have a look at now. And this can be filled out by yourself and the authorised person. Remember, that's someone who conducted or administered the activity. In this form, we're asking for the minimum detail we need to be able to assess your application. So download this, fill out your details, and fill out the details of your referee or authorised person, save it, and upload it to your application. It's as easy as that.
We do encourage you to use your original documentation as far as possible and to use this template when you don't have access to one only.
That's right. So if we go back to the application system itself, uploading documentation is as easy as just selecting the upload button. We need to make sure that the documentation that we're uploading is in color, but there are multiple file types that are accepted up to a 5 megabyte size. If you don't have all the documents ready when you're completing your application, that's okay as well. Just hit next. It's not going to stop you from progressing. You'll receive emails reminding you to come back and upload your documentation. You'll just need to log back into your application to do that. In fact, you can go all the way through and submit your application and still come back and upload supporting documentation as you go along. That more or less brings us to the end of our presentation component, unless there's anything either of you would like to add.
We might talk about the calculator for a bit.
Let's talk about the calculator.
Yeah. So as you can see on the co-curricular or service page, like I said, we want to make this as easy as we can for you. So one of the, to make that a reality, one of the things that we've done is build a calculator on the co-curricular or service webpage. And what the calculator tells you, it gives you, what the calculator does rather, is give you an initial assessment on whether or not you've met the requirement. So the calculator has every activity that we've outlined in the co-curricular or service schedule. So I'm just going to click poetry here, and then under academic extension activity, I'm just going to click that I did Model United Nations. And then it's as simple as clicking go. It tells you whether, based on that information that you've provided, whether you've met the co-curricular and or service requirement or not. And if not, again, it's just an easy way for you to go back to the schedule, have a look at what activities interest you so that you are participating in them and you're getting that documentation in time for your admission, scholarship and accommodation application. So it's as simple as that. And right at the bottom of the page, just to reiterate what Dave was saying, any supporting documentation that you provide needs to meet a few criteria, and that we've just outlined that there. And those are the type of things that we were talking about. It needs to name you as the applicant or the student. It needs to be dated. It needs to identify the activity that you were involved in, and it needs to mention or imply that the commitment requirements that we need for the purposes of the co-curricular or service requirement are met. That brings us to an end of the co-curricular or service webinar.
Fantastic. Let's see if there's any questions. And remember, now is the time to ask questions.
Yeah. You can use either the chat function or the question and answer function. I think we have one right there.
Let me see if I can read that.
So, yeah.
It says, hi, I have a handwritten note from my employer as they don't have letterhead. Is that okay to use as supporting documentation?
Unfortunately, for the purposes of the co-curricular service requirement, that might not be all right. It is university policy that all documentation be official and where possible be printed. So if it's not too much of an issue, could I please get you to have a look at whether you can get something typed up, or in failing all of that, you're more than welcome to use the co-curricular or service template that we talked about.
Okay, let's see if there's any more questions. It looks like, Tony, we've got a question from you, or your hand has been raised. And Janet, it looks like a question might be coming in as well. Yes, the question is, will the recording of this webinar be shared? And the answer to that is yes, it will be hosted on the virtual open day platform.
Tony, could we please request that you use the Q&A function so that we have any answers, we answer any questions that you have, and same for you as well, Chantel? Thank you.
Okay, so James has asked, would my drama class performance count as a creative performance activity? That's a good question.
That's a good question. So as long as it's an activity that's not part of your curriculum, it should very well count as a creative performance activity. If you've done it as part of your curriculum, unfortunately, that's part of your year 12. So we are focusing on activities that you do outside of classroom, but if you did put on a show for the public or your school, or if it was an activity outside your curriculum requirements, that would very much be counted as a creative performance activity.
And in that case, the authorised person would be your drama teacher. Okay, we've received a question from Chantel. And Chantel asks, I have moved to a specialist selective arts school and done an extended visual arts course provided by it, but it's within the school and still meeting the school curriculum. Does this count or not count as co-curricular?
Chantel, we might require a few more details before we answer that question. So for the purposes of making sure that we're giving you the right advice, could I please ask you to get in touch with our domestic admissions team? We do have a few questions that we'd like to ask so that we're giving you the right advice. The contact details for the domestic admissions team we'll just type up on the chat function so that you have access to that. And then feel free to give us a call, or if you give us your number, we're more than happy to give you a call and discuss your specific situation. Hope that's all right.
Okay, so James has asked, do other prefect positions count as school captaincy? And under the schedule, we do count other members of Student Representative Council, so yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your details, Chantel. We'll definitely get in touch soon.
And I will say, if you do have a question that pops up after this session has ended, you can always contact domestic admissions.
We might just type up the domestic admission details in the chat bar so that everyone has access to it. So, could it be the chat function right at the bottom?
So this is the email address for our admissions team, domestic.admissions@anu.edu.au. If there are any questions that you have throughout the application process, just send us an email and we'll get back to you.
And did you want to give the phone number?
Let's do that.
I do.
Yes.
What is the phone number?
6125 5594.
We might add the 02 for Canberra.
Of course.
And you can call any time between 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m.
Fantastic.
What are some common questions that we've received? So often we get questions from students who'll say, I don't think I meet the co-curricular service requirement. Anecdotally, I know, but 9 times out of 10 in my experience, when they've had a look at the co-curricular service schedule, they've found an activity that they have already participated in, which can contribute towards meeting this requirement. If they absolutely think that they haven't met the requirement, that would be the time to get in touch with domestic admissions and we can have a chat. You may have participated in something that doesn't really fit with the traditional definition of co-curricular service requirement, but we can really explain the details of this requirement to you if you get in touch. So we're due to go on for a few more minutes.
I have a question for you, Dave.
Fantastic.
Are there any activities within the schedule that doesn't meet the requirement?
There are some activities which do not meet the requirement alone.
Mm-hmm.
From the top of my head, let's say I was participating in an animal show.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that only gets 2 of the skills. Now you may recall that you need 3 of the 7 skills to meet the requirement. So in addition to participating in an animal show, which might be showing my prize dog at the local fair, I wouldn't need to look for another activity in that schedule. With different skills, I can't get the same 2 skills over and over again. I need to get 3 different skills out of the 7 skills.
There you go. Any more questions from our attendees today?
I think we have one here from Tony.
So Tony asked, do the merit awards or the mathematics competition count? We may need a bit more information on what specific mathematics competition that you're referring to. We do have academic competitions as part of the schedule. We just need to look at the details. So Tony, if you can just send an email to domestic admissions, we'd be able to confirm that for you.
Let's scroll down. It seems that there's more in the question and answer.
So we've got another question. The question is, I was wondering if participation in student council this year, but not last year, would be able to be counted. Is there a commitment requirement?
So there is a commitment requirement, I think, for 6 months. And unfortunately, because you need to meet the requirement at the time of application, Julie, I am concerned that you might not meet the requirement just for the months. But again, it is an activity that is counted in the schedule. So if you wanted to talk particulars, you're more than welcome to email us at domestic.admissions@anu.edu. And we have another question on the student council as well. This is from Nicole, who asks, does house captain count as a school captaincy, not student council? We encourage you to put that down as a student council activity as well, rather than a school captain as a separate activity. Thanks, Nicole. Any other questions?
If there's no more questions, we'll wrap this up in just about 2 minutes time. And again, just get in touch with domestic admissions if a burning question pops up in the middle of the night that you need answered. So we've got another question come through from Chantel, who asks, I've done heaps of extracurricular activity before year 10, but since moving to this school, which is far away, I've had less time to do anything co-curricular. Chantel, it'd be great to have a conversation with you. If you contact domestic admissions via email or phone, we can have a chat about some of the options that you have completed. There is a good chance, I would think, that if you've done a lot before year 10, that you've probably met the requirement now. And if not, there are still one-off activities that you can do to meet the requirement.
We have one from Grace. For supporting documentation, is it better to use the document template provided on the website or independent documents? As long as it's meeting the documentation requirements, so that's that little blurb that we saw right below the calculator, Grace, it's fine, because we understand that these types of documents vary greatly out there, and we appreciate that. So as long as it names you as the applicant and sort of specifies that the commitment requirements were met and is dated and has the contact details of the official body that administered or conducted your activity, that's fine. The templates there or the supporting documentation examples there just guides you as to what we expect. And it's mainly there to show you that we don't need big recommendation letters. Precise, to the point, concise documents is all we need.
Here's a good question for you, Amit. If I'm applying for the Tuckwell Scholarship, when do I have to provide all of my supporting documentation?
That's an excellent question. So the Tuckwell Scholarship actually has a separate deadline, which is towards the end of this month. If you could help me out, Dave. The 28th of March. If you intend to apply for the Tuckwell Scholarship, it is a separate application. However, you need to start your admission scholarship and accommodation application before you can commence your Tuckwell application. There's a part of your admission scholarship and accommodation application where there's a question that basically asks you whether you intend to apply for the scholarship. And as long as you click on yes, you will be sent another link via the registered email address that gives you access to the Tuckwell Scholarship application. All you need to do is make sure that you submit your admission scholarship and accommodation application, as well as your Tuckwell application by the 28th of March. And this does include any supporting documentation as well. So that date is coming up. So for those of you who are interested, I'd encourage you to meet that deadline.
Okay. Very last chance for questions.
There is a follow-up question from Chantal that says, how does the co-curricular or service activities affect my application / what is valid? Like Dave said, the co-curricular or service requirement does not adjust your selection rank in any way. So it does not give you any points towards your selection rank or your entrance rank, or doesn't add adjustment factors to your ATAR. It is purely a threshold requirement, which means you need to meet that requirement before we can consider you for an admission assessment. It is a compulsory requirement, which means everyone who's applying and is a domestic school leaver will need to meet this requirement to gain entry. So it is an admission requirement. So to the extent that it is, you have to meet that requirement in order to gain a place or in order to be considered for a place at the university.
And just to expand on that, we should say that this does apply to all domestic school leavers, regardless of how they apply to ANU. So if they submit a admission scholarship and accommodation application, or if you choose to apply later in the year via UAC, you will still need to meet the co-curricular service requirement. Okay.
Fantastic.
If there are no more questions, we might wrap that up there. Oh, sorry, it looks like there is one last question. From actually one of my colleagues who is just mentioning that there will be a Tuckwell presentation at 5:30. So if anyone's interested in that, definitely do stick around to watch that presentation. As I was saying, if there are any more questions that do crop up, please feel free to email us. Thanks for coming along today. Do we have time for one more question?
Sure.
This will be the last one. So let me have a look what Grace has asked.
If we have already met the requirement before we input all the co-curriculars we're involved in, should we still put that information in? And the quick answer is yes, Grace. So if you've already met the requirement, you're still encouraged to put all the activities you've been involved with, because that information, especially if you were involved in leadership activities, could count towards your scholarship application being assessed. And it, like Dave said as well, it gives us an idea about the types of activities you're involved in so that we can match you up to similar activities while you're here at the ANU. Don't forget, the ANU is a hugely residential university, and we're a small university, so we have a good connection with our students, and we want to make sure that you have a wholesome experience while you're here as well. So yes, I definitely encourage you to put in all the activities you've been involved with. Thanks so much. I think that brings us to an end.
It does. Thank you for coming along. Do get in touch if there's anything else. Thank you for your time today.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.